Good morning and happy Sunday to you. Welcome to another episode of Sundays with Sam. So glad to have you with me today. And I would like for you to subscribe to the channel, invite your family and friends. And I just appreciate you coming out here with me every Sunday to start your week off right with a devotional. And today is going to be a little bit different. I know that on the 4th, it is Independence Day. That's the day it's celebrated. But what I wanted to talk about, I thought it would be befitting to talk about the independence of those who were enslaved. And we celebrated a couple of weeks ago, Juneteenth, and I have on my Juneteenth t-shirt here to commemorate that. So, what I wanted to do is just give a little history lesson today because as I was looking at different posts on social media, some people were celebrating Juneteenth. There were even some who said, well, why should we have been off today? Because somebody asked a question if you were off work or not. And some people didn't even realize why they should have been off. And then some people were off but didn't really realize what the significance of Juneteenth is. So I'm not going to just share like the whole history, but I wanted to just kind of look at some key points to at least just kind of make you aware of the significance. So Juneteenth is also called Jubilee Day or Freedom Day because the people were just in, they were very jubilous when they found out that they were actually free. So in 1863 is when the Emancipation Proclamation was written to actually free the slaves. But there was a whole group of slaves that didn't even know they were free. And the Juneteenth comes about as a result of them finding out that they were actually free. And when you look at the history of what happened, as the Union troops were beginning to win and they were coming further and further in the South, some of the slave owners got an idea. They were like, okay, so what we need to do is move further away from the action. So they moved from the states, like Alabama, Louisiana, out the states to the southeast, and they started going to the west because that was further from the action. So they moved there and took all their slaves with them, so the slaves wouldn't know what was going on. So when they got freed, they didn't know they were freed because there weren't any troops or anything in that area to let them know what was happening. But there was this one situation where one of the slaves actually overheard the slave owners talking about them being free, but they were going to still hold on to them for another crop season or two just to work them a little bit longer and before they let them know they were free. She overheard it and of course went running out to the fields to tell everybody. And then I just kind of described that as the first boycott because then it was over. They put down all their tools or whatever and said, okay, we out of here. So they start working on that particular plantation. So that was the end of slavery for that plantation. But when we go to June 19th, 1865, that's when General Granger came to Galveston to let the slaves know that they were actually free. So he had a portion of the Emancipation Proclamation that he brought, and they all gathered around, and he read that to them to let them know that they were free. So of course they were shouting and crying, saying hallelujah and dancing and jumping around and just really excited. But the sad thing is that they should have been doing that 2.5 years before, and they didn't even know. But we just are thankful that the day did happen. That was like 250,000 people in that particular area. So once they received their freedom, then they wanted to try to find their other family members because when they were on the auction block, one slave owner may have gotten the mother and somebody else got the father, somebody else got the children. A lot of the families got split up. So they wanted to try to find their family members, and they put ads in newspapers and sent word of mouth and just put up notices, trying to reunite with their families. So sometimes they would even go back to like the last place where all the family was together, just hoping to have a reunion with their family members. So this actually started the family reunion. And as I was reading through, I didn't even realize that. I thought, oh, so that's how, in the African American culture, family reunions are big. And we do have family reunions all the time. And this is how it really started, because the slaves wanted to reunite with their family members after they were all free. And they started, having the celebrations and coming together and just being joyous and having food and fun and fellowship with their family members. So we have our family reunions today. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And, after they got free, the former slaves would come together on that day, on June 19th, to celebrate. Well, some of the other people didn't like that they were now free and they had civil liberties that they didn't have before. Some of blacks were like in Congress and, holding positions or what have you. So as they were trying to have these celebrations, they started kind of giving them a hard time, not letting them use the property or land where they were. They would put them off and say, well, no, you can't use this. So there were some former slaves who got together, and Jack Gates was one of those that kind of led the charge to get their own. They was like, okay, we can just get our own land. So in 1872, they bought 10 acres in Houston, and they formed the first Emancipation Park. So this was a place where they would go every year to have all their celebrations and get together. And then there are some other emancipation parks in other states that formed their own parks too. But this was a way they knew they had a place to go where they could all come together and celebrate. So, and I'm not telling you all the details of the history, but I want to just hit some high points. So I'm skipping over to 1980, when Texas was the first state to actually celebrate Juneteenth as a state holiday. And what was his name? Al Edwards. He was a state legislator that was pushing to have that happen. So in 1980, it officially became the first state to recognize it as a state holiday. And in years after that, other states, started doing something, maybe not to the extent of Texas as having it as an official holiday, but they started recognizing it in some form. And I live here in Alabama, and in 2012, due to some pushing by Hank Sanders, then Alabama did start to recognize it, not to the extent of an official state holiday, but it was recognized in Alabama in 2012. So we move on from 1980 to I'm going to skip all the way to 2016. Opal Lee is known as the grandmother of Juneteenth. And it is just so awesome that this lady, a grandmother in her 80s, she decided she wanted to push for federal legislation. So we had gotten the state legislation, and she walked from Fort Worth, Texas to Washington, D.C. How awesome is that? I'm like, man. And she walked 2.5 miles a day, because it was 2.5 years before it was recognized that all of the slaves in the Confederate States had been freed. So she wanted to push legislation, and she walked those 2.5 miles every day. And that is just amazing to me, that she would have the strength and fortitude to do that. So, along with her efforts and some others in Congress and in this legislature, there were other people pushing for it. Year after year, there were a lot of changes that happened in 2020 after the death of George Floyd. So, in 2021 is when President Biden actually signed Juneteenth into the federal legislation to make it a federal holiday. So, we're excited about that. We appreciate that being done, but I wanted to just kind of talk about, why it's significant. And just the last thing that I was going to talk about before I sign off, there's a lot of significance in the red foods. Red means resilience. This is something that people do when they're actually celebrating Juneteenth. Is eating the red foods or drinking the red punch or the red juice. And you have red velvet cake, raspberries, watermelon, tomatoes, and all the different things that are red, just representing the resilience of those who were enslaved, representing the bloodshed, the spirituality, the life and death of those, and all the things that they went through. So there is some importance too in eating and drinking the red foods. I just wanted to say that as well. So like I said, there's a lot of things that we could talk about, but I just wanted to just touch on those high points and just have you think about, I know that we're as a nation celebrating July 4th for independence, but just wanted to kind of bring back and help you to remember to continue to always celebrate Juneteenth as well. All right. So we will sign off like we normally do. I am one. Repeat after me. I am one and only one. I can't do all things, but I can do some things that I can do, I ought to do. And by the grace of God, I will do it. Go and have yourselves an amazingly awesome week. And I will see you here next Sunday.